Listen to this statement. Based purely on performance compared with recent history, there might not be a better college football coach than SMU's Rhett Lashlee.
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You know, the ACC is the conference of Bill Belichick. It's the conference of Dabo Swinney, but it's also the conference of Rhett Lashlee. Let's give the guys some more love. Thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. He is Kenton Gibbs, former NC State defensive lineman and co-host of Locked On Wolfpack. I am Alex Donno, former Pee Wee League defensive lineman and co-host of host of Locked On Kenton. I wanted to mix up the intro a little bit. And on this loaded episode of Locked On ACC, we're going to talk about that Rhett Lashlee statement, which came from the ESPN ACC preview, which just dropped this week, and it's an amazing read. And there's also some really interesting nuggets in there on who the top conference contenders are, what the top non-conference games and conference games are in the ACC, and the returning talent charts are interesting. But Kenton Gibbs, let's dissect that nugget that Bill Connolly of ESPN dropped on Rhett Lashlee and why he's probably not wrong. So again, he says, based purely on performance compared with recent history, there might not be a better college football coach than Rhett Lashlee. Before his tenure, Connolly adds, the SMU Mustangs' previous 2 seasons with 11-plus wins came in 1982 and 1935. He did it in 2023 and 2024. And of note, Kenton, that included making the jump from the American to the Atlantic Coast Conference. So like Lashlee and SMU got themselves 11 wins in their final year in the AAC, and everyone, including me and probably you, thought there's no way he can do that in the ACC, and then he does it again the second straight year. And this is not a blue chip job that Lashlee inherited, right? I mean, you know, Kalen DeBoer is doing an okay job at Alabama, but that was, you know, the destination in the country before he took over for Nick Saban, right? I mean, Rhett Lashlee takes over an SMU team that hadn't won 11 games since the Pony Excess era was going on there. It's really remarkable.
Well, you know, you talk about the Pony Excess. We could go BD, AD, before death penalty, after death penalty. There has been nothing virtually in SMU's history since the death penalty that it really got you here. And not only that, I think one of the biggest things that we need to give Rhett Lashlee credit for, Dallas-Fort Worth is known as a metroplex, right? Although they're accepted as 2 different municipalities, they're known as like the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area. The SMU job is not even the most attractive in that metroplex. Let's be honest. If you're comparing, before Rhett Lashlee got there, if you're comparing TCU to SMU, people would have told you by a mile, TCU is a better football school. What are we doing? Why would we even, this isn't a debate, this isn't a conversation. And yet, Rhett Lashlee has that team with as many playoff appearances as TCU has had. And yet, Rhett Lashlee, when recruiting against the big boys of Texas A&M, you compete with all those schools down there in that area, like a TCU, with Baylor, all those teams, and you go out there and you get yourself these wins on the recruiting trail. You go out there and become a master of the portal. You go out there and jump levels in terms of divisions, because we all know, with all due respect, there is a difference between the group of 5 and the Power 4. Now group of 6 and Power 4. But you jump from the group of 6 to the Power 4, and you go to the championship as the top seed in year 1, you better put some respect on Rhett's name, man. You better put some respect. Last year, they were called Miami West. Technically, they were Miami Best last year because they were in the ACC championship as opposed to Miami, who was not. So Rhett Lashlee deserves all the love for the job that he's done. And now we've got Locked On SMU as well. So,
That's right.
I said that we would do no such thing here until we were to free Sherwood Blunt. Apparently, they let him out. He's back boosted. I'm joking. I don't know if he's back a booster. I'm joking. Please do not get upset with me about that, SMU fans. But I do love me some Sherwood Blunt. But in all seriousness, this is a very great moment for SMU.
Yeah, and so SMU, in the ESPN SP Plus rankings, their preseason ratings, they have them third in the ACC with Clemson number 1, Miami at number 2, SMU third. Now, I've already taken a look at the Phil Steele preview, which we're going to break that down more thoroughly on a future episode. Phil Steele actually has SMU second in the conference behind Clemson. So they are getting some love, Kenton, a team that was not supposed to be in the ACC championship last year, certainly not supposed to be in the college football playoff. And they didn't win in either of those things, but they accomplished both of those goals to get there, which was impressive. Now, let me ask you, how much harder is it when you become the hunted, right? Because if you looked at SMU last year, kind of a lovable underdog scenario, nobody thought they'd probably win more than, I think their over under last year was probably around, just because their schedule wasn't that tough. Maybe it was like a 7.5 over under, but they got to 11 wins last year. Like, the secret is out, and there's more tape on Kevin Jennings, who did an impressive job. Didn't start the season as their starting quarterback, but Preston Stode got benched. They didn't look back at Kevin Jennings. Teams will have more. They'll have the full offseason to prepare for him now. The schedule's a little bit tougher than it was a year ago, Kenton. How much harder is it to be the hunted than the hunter?
It's exponentially harder. It's exponentially harder to be the hunted, because the way that the hunter works, the way that mentality and that role works, like you said, the biggest thing, teams had not seen Kevin Jennings and what he likes to do. Teams had not seen, he enjoys throwing this route pattern the most. This is where he enjoys going with the ball the most. And if you let him get here, he will kill you. It's easy to say that. Defensive coordinator said it about everybody. You could be playing, the little league team that Donno held from the mighty Miami Titans of his little league team, of his little league, unit there. And guess what? A head college football coach, don't you let that Alex Donno get going up the middle. He'll destroy you. He'll tear you apart. And the whole time you're thinking that's an 8-year-old. But that's what college coaches do, right? If you watch the Catholics versus Convicts documentary, when they were talking about how Lou Holtz motivated his teams, they said on Monday there was no shot. We had no shot of beating them. They were so much better than us. And then on Tuesday, well, if we execute properly, we could do it. So I say all of that to say, and of course, the confidence level increased every day till Friday. The other team, they were going to win by 50. But this is how it works for everybody. Last year, you could say till you're blue in the face, SMU's going to get you. They're going to get you. But teams would look at them and say, that's an AAC team. Subconsciously, teams would have that in the back of their mind. That's an American Conference team, man. They ain't one of us for real. And then all of a sudden, you look at the scoreboard at the end of the game. You say, well, now what the hell done happened? This year, you're expecting them. They've arrived. They've arrived. So it's that going from wearing the white hat to going to wearing the black hat. It's the nation isn't rooting for you, saying, that lovable SMU. It's so good to see them doing well. They're not quite in that territory yet, but they're approaching that territory where people are like, all right, okay, SMU. Now we got to find reasons to criticize you. So the teams around the conference are looking at them, all eyes on them, saying, okay, we hear you. We hear you knocking. A lot like how we talked about Fran Brown on the recruiting trail yesterday, where we said him landing Calvin Russell now puts everybody on notice to say, if Syracuse in that top 5, now we got to beat them out. We can't just say, I'm a dirty Mac Michigan and Oklahoma and Ohio State and land the player. No. I've also got to be weary of Syracuse. It's the exact same thing with SMU this year.
We had yesterday was maybe the most Syracuse-focused episode we've ever done, because Fran Brown just pulled off the biggest recruiting victory, arguably in Syracuse history, at least in the last 25 years, landing a verbal commit from Calvin Russell. So we've got some new Syracuse followers, and I think this is going to be interesting to them. Couple of notes on how ESPN sees Syracuse this upcoming season, and a bigger picture, Kenton, looking at a few teams that they consider to be legit college football contenders, college football playoff contenders in the ACC. A bunch of teams that can get there if they get a lucky break or two, And then a whole bunch of teams are going to be fighting for 6 and 6 in their words. You want to keep it locked. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. Folks, the only ticket app that Kenton Gibbs and I use is Game Time. There's no reason to use anyone else. We're getting the best features, the best technology, the best prices. And the prices at Game Time go down. They get lower the closer you get to the event, which is a dream come true for a procrastinator like me, because I've been that way all my life, and I finally get rewarded for it. And this happens sometimes when you're buying tickets. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends and family? I do it all the time. Maybe it's game day, and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without stress. And with the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes that possible because Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Guys, the seat views are right there in the app before you buy, so you know exactly where you're going to be. Guys, Game Time has last-minute tickets and zone deals for big savings, like 10% off exclusive zone deals for FIFA Club World Cup matchups. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch. For your next listen, make sure you check out our other shows. Mention Kenton Gibbs and Grayson Boone host Locked On Wolfpack, covering you on all things NC State. I host Locked On Canes, covering all things University of Miami. Kenton, we knew this already from looking at the SP Plus and all the ESPN metrics. So Clemson, who's favored to win the ACC, and I think a hefty favorite, they have the highest percentage of returning talent in the entire country at 80%. 80% of their two deep returns from last season. The ACC is actually above average in that. The national average in college football is only at about 53% returning talent. The ACC's average is closer to 60. So I think that's a good sign overall for the conference. But I would not have guessed this. Maybe I should have, because I think my guess would have been probably Cal or maybe North Carolina in terms of who returns the lowest percentage of their talent. I mean, UNC, the high-profile coaching change, a lot of transfers out, when the Belichick era began. Cal had like half of their, literally more, I guess almost half of their roster left. But Syracuse returns the lowest percentage of talent in the country or in the ACC, I should say. I don't know about in the country, but Syracuse returns only 46% of their production from last year. Now, you and I both agree, we stand by this. We love the way Fran Brown coaches and the way he's building that program, and he's scoring bigger recruiting wins than any of his predecessors in this millennium have gotten, right? But at the same time, how much of a step back can Syracuse, who's got the toughest schedule in the ACC and the lowest percentage of returning talent, how much of a step back from 10 wins last year, including the bowl win, how much can they afford to take in terms of a step back without stunting the growth that Fran is creating there?
Well, I think that that's a multi-part and layered question. How much of a step back can they afford without stunting the growth? I'm not sure. Because I feel like recruits are aware of the fact that, hey, you're playing half of last year's college football playoff without a quarterback who has a starting experience, without a running back that has starting experience, without any of your top 3 to 4 receivers from last year, without, like, you're losing so much that to say, oh yeah, the recruits are expecting you to be excellent this year, and if you're not, that's going to be a problem. Well, then those recruits are not being realistic with themselves. So how much of a step can they afford to take back? I'm not sure, but they're going to be doing the cha-cha slide backwards with all due respect. It's going to one hop this time, two hops this time, It's going to be multiple leaps back here because this is going to be a serious problem for them. We're not just talking about a lack of production returning. If they had a lack of production returning, but the exact same schedule that they had last year, I would be comfortable saying, you know what? I think Fran Brown can still muster up at least 7 to 8 out of that group.
Yeah. With
what we are seeing from who's going to be the starting quarterback? Angeli? Collins?
Angeli.
Okay, Angeli. How many games has Angeli started?
I don't think he started any. He's played a lot of relief. Okay.
LaQuint Allen, is he coming back? Okay, so we know Gaston, Pena, all these guys, Meeks, we know all these guys are gone. And we know on top of them being gone, we're looking at a situation where the schedule is exponentially harder than it was last year. It wouldn't be fair. It wouldn't be fair or right to say to this team, hey, we're expecting you to be on par with what you were last year. And I will tell you, if they are on par with where they were last year, Fran Brown deserves Coach of the Year consideration. I don't care who wins the conference. I don't care who does what. He at least needs to be a finalist for Coach of the Year if they are a 9-10 win team again, based upon how much they lost and how difficult this schedule is.
You're right. I mean, we gave the reasons why based on what he's done the last couple of years, why Rhett Lashlee may be like pound for pound the best coach in college football. But if Fran gets to 9 or 10 wins with this schedule, build the man a statue in Syracuse. Like he's going to deserve that. Oh man.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, honestly, don't just build him a statue, get him a lifetime contract. Get him in a 360 deal that he cannot leave, because guess what? If he has success this season, Donno, do you not imagine every major school that has a coaching opening will be calling for him or won't be calling for him? If Billy Napier actually ends up on LinkedIn this year, guess what? The Gators going to be calling. He has a track record in the Southeast. If something happens where Michigan figures, Sherrod Moore just ain't the guy. He just ain't the guy. We want to fully purge everything from that Harbaugh era and all that good stuff. You think they're not going to be calling for a coach that had a Kyle McCord that everybody thought, oh, he was the problem. He was what was holding Ohio State back. You had a bunch of guys who transfers that may not have been starters or may not have been the guy at their old school. And then you flip that with the next season saying, I'm going to take career backup Steve Angeli, who could not start over Riley Leonard that objectively last year he wasn't great. He was fine, but he wasn't great. You take that to play. Every major school that has a coaching opening is going to be called.
So, all right, here's they've got a bunch of teams on these ESPN preview that are either conference contenders or teams that need a break or two to go their way. But then I'm looking at this category at the bottom here, just looking for a path to 6-6, which is essentially a nice way to say these are the teams that do not have a chance to compete for the ACC, but they're trying to get to a bowl game is what they're saying here. Let me see if you disagree with any of these. So they got Boston College in that mix, which, Bill O'Brien heading into his second year there. Syracuse, for the reasons that we just discussed with the schedule. Virginia Cavaliers and Wake Forest Demon Deacons and the Stanford Cardinal. Those are the 5. Now, so notably excluded from that list is Cal. Despite all the players that Cal lost, despite all the travel, they do not put Cal in that category that Stanford is in down at the bottom. They think Cal has a chance if they get a couple of breaks to maybe contend this year. But the 5 teams I mentioned are the teams that they're telling us there is not a chance.
I don't disagree with any of those teams being there, but I do feel like Cal needs to be in that group as well. For the simple fact that Harsin has not proven himself to be anything special as a play caller to the point where you're like, hey, he's going to elevate this team over what they had last year, especially given the same things that we had against Syracuse. Many of those same things exist. The biggest difference is Cal's schedule is a lot easier. They play a few Island of Misfit Toys community college universities. That's the only reason why I can feasibly see this without saying we need to start drug testing these writers at ESPN. That's the only reason that's pulling me back, because their schedule is filled with some cupcakes. But even still, I mean, hey, a cupcake against a butter knife, it's still not, it's not exactly the easiest matchup in the world here. So I get where they're coming from, but I think Cal needs to be in that group as well. The rest of these teams, for obvious reasons. I memean, Stanford and all the problems that they have, a temporary coach, any player that could play elsewhere darn near left already. I mean, you're looking at Wake Forest, brand new coach, all that good stuff. You're looking at a lot of teams at this bottom of the list that it makes sense that they're going to be scrapping for 6. But I just think that they have one glaring omission.
Now, I think the most interesting part of these 3 categories are the teams that are in the middle, the teams that are, as they describe, like a couple of breaks away from making a run. So before we get to that, do you agree with the 4 teams that Bill Connolly and ESPN consider to be ACC contenders and thus college football playoff contenders? And those 4 are Clemson, Miami, SMU. We talked about all their reasons why, and Louisville. I'm glad they included them because, again, that's a really talented team with one of the most dynamic running back duos in the country, and I think a pretty good quarterback who joins that squad. So do you think that all 4 of those can contend for a conference title? And is it only those 4, or did they leave somebody
out? That are the main heads of the snake. And if I were a more foolish man, if 2024 did not happen, I would throw Virginia Tech in that group. If I did not feel like, oh, look, it's Groundhog's Day, I'm believing in Kyron Jones again, I would put them in that group because, again, he's a dynamic guy, but he's starting to remind me of Effie Richardson. He's starting to remind me of a guy that's he's got all the tools. The tools are there. The tools for greatness are right there. And it's like, okay, but at some point in time, the potential has to be fully potential. You have to be from a guy that like he shows flashes to he's not a flash guy. That was just Lamar. You could watch an incompletion from Lamar and say, oh, he's got the goods. Yeah. He's got the stuff. We're not really seeing that from him. So that I'm okay with leaving Virginia Tech out of that group. All the other teams that were left out, I don't think that they're serious contenders to win the ACC, but I do think that those 4, it absolutely makes.
So let's talk when we come back about the biggest group here, and those are the teams that are a break or 2 away from making a run. You want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. All right, Kenton Gibbs headlining the group that they say Bill Connolly of ESPN says is a couple of breaks away from making a run. The first team he notes are the Florida State Seminoles, which is interesting because a lot of the conversations we've had with Brian Smith, host of Locked On Seminoles, like he makes it sound like there's no way they're going to contend for an ACC championship. Like you're looking, try to get bowl eligible this year, but Bill Connolly is, he's basically saying Kalen DeBoer is trash and that Nick Saban can't save Alabama. And that I dominated this conference last year on Boston. Like, you did what, Castellanos? And I know you like Castellanos, and so do I. But this guy,
he's writing checks that his butt can't cash, his left tackle's butt can't cash, his right guard's butt can't cash. None of them have enough behind to cash these checks. Nobody. That thing is going to bounce like a basketball in the NBA. No way that Florida State makes that leap. And let me tell you something. You talk about Brian Smith, everybody likes to, criticize, talk about what Locked On is or ain't. There was only one outlet that said this is going to be a 2 to 3 win team in the beginning of the season. In the beginning. And it wasn't even us. I'd love to take credit for it. It wasn't even us. Brian Smith told everybody early in the season, that's it. That's it. And what did they go on to do? 2-10. I'm telling you right now, there is nobody that works harder. There is nobody that is more detailed in this game and for their team than Brian Smith. And if he's telling you, hey, this ain't it. If you don't believe me, go back to last year after the Georgia Tech game. Come here and watch. Come here after the Boston College game. Come here and see what happens. Now, if you don't believe it, I don't believe it.
It's funny you say that about last year because you're so right. Like, even I'm the Miami guy, and even after Florida State's 0-2 start, it wasn't until the third or the fourth loss from like, all right, maybe Brian was right about this.
I didn't see running the table, but I didn't feel like that was ridiculous. I'm like, hey, they don't have the toughest schedule in the world. They can get 5 to 6. And lo and behold, they didn't even scratch 5. They didn't even sniff 5. Yeah. So I'm telling you, that team, you know, we're talking about a team that, to me, I think 7 to 8 wins is a phenomenal season. I think 7 to 8 wins, you have done your big one, you have done amazing, but you are talking about a team that Donno and I both know what happens to them on that game 1 against Bama, especially given the bulletin board material. Ice Cube wrote a song where he was dissing Jerry Heller and Eazy-E and them, and that it'll, you know, the title of it was No Vaseline. I will let you imagine what that actually means. I imagine that's what's going to happen. I'd love to sit up here and say, oh, look at us being wrong. Look at ACC. What we don't know ACC. I love to call my granny up and brag. Oh, you see how your tie got did, granny. I just saw this weekend. I just don't think it's going to shake out that way. So, you know, I don't think after the way that they get beat in game 1, most likely, I don't see a world where they bounce back in full force afterwards.
By the way, I just want people to know we do have to revisit this ESPN preview probably later this week because we could probably do a whole show or at least 2/3 of the show on the Miami angle of it because like Bill Connolly doubts his own data. Like when he's talking about Miami, he's like, Mario Cristobal gets this whole. That's what Miami does. It makes you crazy. I've been a Miami fan my entire life. Like that program makes you crazy. So we'll have to dive back into that. But in terms of the rest of the teams in the category of a couple of breaks away from a run, let me give you the rest and tell me if these all belong here. Duke Blue Devils are in there. NC State Wolfpack are in there. Georgia Tech is in there. As the Georgia Tech is in that group. And Pittsburgh and Cal are both in that group. Today, I think we already talked about the Cal angle of it, but how do you feel about the rest of that mixed teams that are a couple of breaks away from making a run?
Georgia Tech should either be the highest of this group or the lowest of the last group.
They should be the highest of it, I believe. Yeah.
They should either be the highest of this group or the lowest of the contenders because there are plenty of worlds where Georgia Tech is a legitimate contender. Again, Georgia Tech still scares me from a depth standpoint at some important positions. But what we have seen from Georgia Tech, if the best indicator of the future is past behaviors, we have seen this team consistently get better, consistently grow, consistently win recruiting battles where you're like, wait, they got who? They won who up out of Georgia? So you're looking at this team and you're saying to yourself, they have a quarterback that is coming back that has done this thing. They have a starting running back that has been a bell cow that has done this thing. They have done this thing in the past. I'm looking at this group, and I'm saying my expectation for y'all is to be at the top of this group, bottom of contenders. If you would have told me Georgia Tech is in the contenders group, I wouldn't have been upset about that at all. I wouldn't have been upset about that at all. If you tell me Georgia Tech is at the top of this middle of the pack, at this service, and you are telling me you don't know ball. Now, granted, football is a game where it's a gladiator sport. Injuries happen. And like I said, I have concerns about that at some key positions. But with that being said, if they stay healthy in those key positions, this team, I have no doubt in my mind, at least 8 to 9. At least 8 to 9.
Miami, who has seen Miami improbably lose Georgia Tech each of the last 2 years. And I know from 2 years ago, everybody will say, oh, Miami lost because Cristobal didn't take a knee. There was a lot more to it than that because Georgia Tech was ahead for most of that game. There's a lot more. Are one of the shrewdest game planning teams, and they're always so prepared to turn your strengths into weaknesses. Impeccable game planning. Give a lot of credit to Brent Key and his staff for that. They're always super prepared. So I classify Georgia because you talk the depth concerns and all that. That's a team that perennially overachieves, and I think they do that through great preparation and really good coaching. Like, they usually punch above their weight, and for that reason, I don't think I would put them in the contenders category, the true contenders category. But I agree with you. I think they belong because they'll usually win a couple of extra games they probably shouldn't win. But then if they're able to turn that into, instead of winning like 2 games they shouldn't win, 3 games they shouldn't win that they win, then yeah, they could be knocking on the door to play for an ACC championship.
Absolutely. And think of the reason they didn't have an upset over Georgia last year. 3 yards. 3 yards. They went to 8 overtimes. So if they convert just one extra attempt, all of a sudden they win that ball game. So I look at this and I say, this is Georgia Tech team. They have the makings. As the old, I believe it was Curtis Mayfield song, the makings of you. This is the makings of a contender. There's just certain pieces. And if we're going to say it about Miami, we've also got to say it about Georgia Tech. Miami has always been a spot where it makes sense, but they have not gotten over the hump. Georgia Tech has been on the opposite side of that spectrum. They've always been a team that we're like, they're punching above their weight, but can they hit that next step? Can they hit it? They haven't been to an ACC champ. So just because they're on the opposite end of the spectrum talent-wise as Miami does not mean you get a pass for not getting over the hump. They're right there. They're right there. I really and truly believe that. They're right there, but can they get it done and get it over?
Well said. Well, we appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll be back definitely by Friday, if not before then. I'm finally coming back. I'm complete. My bank accounts, they're in the red. I got to come home at some point, so I will be coming back on Thursday. So probably the next episode will be on Friday. We talk a little bit more about the polarizing nature of Miami when it comes to their ESPN prediction. Make sure everyone checks out Kenton Gibbs on Locked On Wolfpack. Check me out on Locked On and on Locked On Seminoles. Make sure you make that your second listen. And we'll talk to you next time on another episode of Locked On ACC. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.